All right, you guys, I'm talking today about the prophecy of human design and what's to come in 2027. If you guys are not familiar with human design, totally fine. You don't need to know what it is. This is more about why it came about. And of course, I'll be touching on some basics of it. So if you have no understanding whatsoever, you at least get some general idea and why it's important. Now, I want you to know this was a message that was given to the founder of human design. It was not a message that the human design founder actually came up with. So, and I'll discuss that a little bit. I am not here to say whether this is to come true or not. That's up to you guys to make your own decisions, please. And also, I'm going to say that the prophecy is not the most positive. I'm going to make that very clear. It does have some challenges that come with it. There's been a lot of shifting when it comes to this prophecy or what's to come, because a lot of people haven't really liked the message, and a lot of people have changed it to make it into a more positive light. So I'm going to give you kind of both of the views of it, and then you guys can decide for yourself. I personally believe that there's 8 billion people almost on this planet, and I'll explain how human design came about. But to understand that at the time, Ra-Uru was chosen as the person to give this message for a reason. They chose him amongst the 8 billion people. And so they probably had a good assumption of how he was going to deliver it. And that's the reason why they wanted it delivered. It was that way. So I'm a traditionalist where I'm like, okay, if something was said, let's keep it that way. Let's not play telephone and change it around. But I also believe in open perspective. So that's why I will give you both of kind of how people are kind of viewing it as. Now, if there's something with the message that you don't like, or there's something that's not resonating with you, I will not be offended if you're like, I'm out, don't want to deal with this. Totally fine. I get it. Don't worry. No one's going to die. So let's just make that clear. Well, no, I don't hope not, but it's not doomsday, but it's just that there are going to be some challenges, which have already come about to surface, which I'm sure a lot of people have realized, why is the world so crazy right now? And this has a lot of reason to do with it. So just to keep that in mind, I am going to be discussing some things about mental health, and particularly autism. So if that's a sensitive subject for you, but it does have something to do with why things are shifting the way they are. So again, this is just the message that was given. Don't shoot the messenger. Okay. Now I'm going to share my screen here. Just 1 second. One second. Come on. Okay. All right. So what is human design? Now, for those that are not familiar with this, human design is your energetic blueprint. It's kind of based off ancient systems of modern science, including astrology, the I Ching, Kabbalah, chakras, mixed in with epigenetics and quantum physics. So if you think about your DNA is your biological blueprint. When you get your DNA sequence, it's going to tell you what's your traits, what your diseases are, where your ancestry is from, your history. So think about it as in human design is your energetic blueprint, where it's the same way. It's going to give you the traits of self-discovery, why you are the way you are, the challenges that you have. It can also guide you on making decisions and kind of leading more to a fulfilling life through your authority. It will basically tell you how your body works in an energetic level and how you're supposed to work with it. It can help you understand relationships, children, and pets. There is something called mammalian design, which I love doing. And that's to discover how your pets are and your animals, as long as they're mammals, what your purpose is or where your career may be stronger in. And when I say purpose, I mean, as in what is it that you're going to be achieving at? What is your purpose of being here in a way? Now, I'm not going to tell you what you would do for a job or something like that, but I can tell you where your skills are and what would be most beneficial, because I don't like telling people what they should do. So that's up to you. I can tell you what your spiritual gifts are, as well as if you're someone that's working with your shadow. Human design is a great way of figuring out what your shadows are. Also, if you have health issues, especially autoimmune diseases, and then also there's something called life cycles, where everybody in this world goes through certain cycles in their life. You might kind of be familiar with the quarter life crisis, and then there's the midlife crisis, and then there's kind of the midlife crisis that kind of, if you haven't figured out all this stuff, then you always go through another one too. Now, to get your chart, you have to have your birth date, super important, birthplace, and your birth time. The birth time is very important. If you do not have your birth time, you can reach out to a recertification astrologer that can help you with that. You can consult a pendulum, or you can find your birth certificate. Sometimes it's on there, but I believe there was only a few states that started putting the time on there. If the hospital is still around where you were born, you could also get it from there. And always ask your parents. But and if all of that doesn't work, you can go and kind of figure it out, at least your type and some of it. It's just that you're not going to be able to get into the line information of for health and stuff, because that really goes down to the minute. No chart is the same, because even identical twins charts aren't the same. Just like identical twins, even though they're identical and their DNA is pretty much similar, when it comes to the variants, there's always going to be some kind of shift when it comes to nature and nurture. So now how it began. So Alan Krakauer, he was a very prominent person in Canada. He actually he owned his own media company. He's was responsible for a lot of commercials and this kind of fashion movement in Toronto. And in 1983, he disappeared. And he went on this journey, and he's like, I'm out. And during this time, he went to Ibiza, and he kind of gave up all of his material possessions and was living kind of in the wild without money and just discovering life and figuring out who he was. Then in January of 1987, he was visiting with some friends, and all of a sudden he got a really bad headache, and he said, I'm going to go home. And when he got to his house, there was a light on, even though nobody had access to the house, and actually the lights weren't working in the house. So he was a little confused. And then he also had his dog, Barley Barker, with him, and even the dog didn't want to go inside. But of course he's like, okay, I'm going to go in. And he goes in, and he heard, are you ready to work? And all of a sudden the dog kind of fell into this trance, and so did he, for about 8 days and 8 nights. Just no control, no eating, sleeping, nothing. Just for 8 days and 8 nights, he basically downloaded this information from something that was called The Voice. The Voice never identified themselves. They never said, this is who I am. But it was basically saying, these are all the way that humans and all life forms are created. It wasn't just about humans. I mean, plants, reptiles, inanimate objects. Talked about the Big Bang Theory, how the universe started. And the reason why he was getting the message was because there was a huge shift that was coming in 2027. And that was going to be the emergence of a new species. Now, this experience, he said, was extremely painful for him. He said, every time the voice talked to him, he felt okay. But every time that voice was quiet, he said it felt like he was dying. It's like he felt like he was being ripped apart from his body this entire time. And he got the voice gave him the name Urahu, which translates into a door closer. And this is because the door is closing on humanity in a way. And so he was supposed to be giving this message. Now, when he came out of the trance, the dog was fine. Most important thing, dog was okay. He just came back to life, everything totally normal. But that's how he also got the information on Mammalian Design, because he asked about the dog. Well, he was like, okay, well, this is cool about humans, but what about these dogs? And so that. So, but he kind of freaked out. He was like, oh my God, I don't want to tell anybody this message. He ripped up all the papers, burned everything. He's like, I'm never telling anything about this, because he's like, people are going to think I'm freaking nuts. And then as time went on, it kind of haunted him. And as he was a father and stuff, he realized the importance of it. And then he started seeing things kind of happening in the world where he's like, okay, what they were telling me is kind of true. So I need to deliver this message. And it was really because of what I'll be discussing about, something called the Rave that's coming out of this species, and also for people to be able to raise their children in a nurturing way and to be really embrace them as their authentic self. And so he published his first book in 1991. And ever since that, he created the human design system and started teaching it, and it's risen throughout the time. Now, he died in 2011. So he had a stroke, but it's kind of crazy because the books and stuff on this topic, I'll be honest, I was reading it and I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna tell people this? Everyone's gonna think I'm crazy. So, but the more and more I did the research behind it, I was like, it's kind of one of those, whoa, that's kind of crazy because that fits. And then it kind of starts, the pieces kind of get put together. But with that, like the thing is that, so he's not the prophet. I just want to make that very clear, because a lot of people will say, well, his message doesn't matter because he wasn't a prophet. He's not a prophet. He never claimed to be a prophet. And he even said, like, this stuff is crazy. Like, if you guys don't believe me, I totally understand, because he's like, he knew how intense it was. He called them cosmic fairy tales. But the things that he has predicted, or the information that he's gotten, has come true past his death. And it's kind of sad, because in his book, he talks about, like, I can't wait for this shift to come through. I can't wait to be alive and to see it. And I'm like, well, it's not. But one thing that's kind of ironic too is that when he died in 2011, so everything in human design kind of goes in these 7-year periods. Like, there's a genetic shift in your body. And I think that's where they get it from, is because your body actually changes genetically every 7 years. Like, your taste buds change. You'll like foods that you didn't like as a kid. And so in human design, like, when you're conditioning or changing yourself or learning about yourself, it can take up to a 7-year process. Now, when he died in 2011, it took 7 years for the human design system to kind of grow. And in 2018 is actually the most record hits of human design for searching. So that's when it started to grow. So it's kind of ironic, just like the whole 7-year period thing in the times with that. Okay, so what does this all mean? Well, so in human design, there's something called global cycles. So for us individually, like, if you were to get your chart, you're going to get, it won't look like this actually, but most of them don't include the mandala, but this is called the mandala. So this circle is kind of like the wheel of time. This is the I Ching, these little lines here, and the I Ching corresponds to the gates in human design. The gates are these individual energies that are influential. Now, there's something called the planetary transits or planetary cycles. And so every year, which the new year is not the same for, like, the calendar that we have is different than the calendar for human design. So the new year is actually like January 21st versus January 1st. But the year cycle, it goes for planetary transit, it goes, I think I just did this wrong, actually, now that I think about that. It's clockwise, it's counterclockwise. I think I did that wrong. Sorry, you guys. Okay, so it's clockwise for the planetary cycle. So every day, like every 5 days, this planet's transits through at an 88-degree. And during that time, you'll feel different shifts, like depending on your design, individual design, you're going to be influenced by these gates, depending on where it is in the cycle. Hope that makes sense. But now on the global cycle, it's the opposite, but it goes a lot slower. And so it turns on the opposite direction. So within these gates, you can't really see it here, but there's these little teeny lines here. So each gate has 6 lines. So it goes like 19-1, like if I was to look at like gate 19, is 19-1, 19-2, 19-3, 19-4, 19-5, 19-6. So each gate is in the sun for 6 days. So it goes through each line per day for a 24-hour period, and then it shifts to the next gate. Now on the global cycle, each of these gates that are being influenced are for 400 years. So obviously a lot slower. And the lines will shift every 70 years. Okay, so I hope that makes kind of sense. Like I said, it's kind of hard to explain it when I'm trying to wrap this in a little bundle. But basically, the new cycle is taking effect in 2027. One thing I'm going to mention too is there's a lot of different modalities out there, right? So there's astrology, there's I know there's something called like something to do with like gold, bronze, and copper. So these shifts in the cycles that people talk about, I know there's a significant one that talks about 2025. And when you look at astrology, it also kind of lines up around this time too. So, but just to know, like this for human design is 2027. Okay. Now these cycles, these 400 cycles have to do with this thing called the round, which I'm going to go to the next slide here. So this is called the round of civilization. We are in the round of civilization. So this epochs are these periods of times or like kind of eras in a way that we influence it. Now, our round of civilization, which, as I mentioned, lasts for about 20,000 years. It started in 16,513 BC, and it goes until 3,674 AD. Now, I'm going to say that they say in human design, like that means like the end of like, that's when the apocalypse is coming, but I'm like, they don't know if that's true. However, I will say Nostradamus, if anybody's familiar with Nostradamus, he wrote a book of like predictions from in like 1500 BC. No, was it 1500 BC or AD? Anyways, 1500. He actually talks about it until about, I think it was like 3400 AD. His predictions are up around this time too. So that it doesn't mean like, it could mean that there might be some kind of apocalyptic event, but it doesn't mean like the world's going to end. We don't know. Nobody can say that. So don't worry about it. It doesn't matter anyways, because we're not going to be alive during that time, right? So, okay, we're still alive. Woohoo. So, as you can see how this transitions through, now there's these things called the lock and these keys. The locks, the cross of the Sphinx has to do with these incarnation crosses. So when you get your chart, you're going to get an incarnation cross. This is your purpose of energy, of why you are kind of here and how your energy influences it. So on a global platform, these are the energies or the background kind of frequencies that are going on. And so these incarnation crosses will affect kind of what's going on in the world and how we're taking it in. So the lock means that when these happen, that these energies, the cross of the Sphinx, which has to do with direction, and then the vessel of love has to do with how we love. So both of these incarnation crosses have to do with your identity center. And that's why these two incarnation crosses are significant, because it's all the gates in the identity center, which is where our magnetic monopole sits and where all this energy comes in. Okay. So these locks stay consistent in the background all the time. They're there, you're going to feel them. But what brings out the love in our direction, what directs that and kind of unlocks that energy are the keys. So that's what the cycles are. So these 400 years, whatever's going on, sorry, I'm just going to move this, my little, okay. So what's going on is that every epoch or every cycle, it's going to shift the energies to unlock these locks. I hope that makes sense. I know it's a little confusing because, like I said, it took me a while to understand. I'm like, what? So, but the point is that these frequencies, the channels, so like the cross of planning, and we're going to be switching into the cross of the sleeping phoenix. Okay. Now understand that it's not going to be like, ooh, 2027 is going to hit and everything's going to change. Okay. Nothing works that way when it comes to energy. It takes time for these cycles to go through. So it's usually about a 100-year period. But as the shifts get closer, especially within the 7-year period. So think about when the pandemic started. It started in 2020, right? So that leads up to these 7 years. It's like where the energies are going to really start filtering through and you're going to start seeing a lot of changes. But for it to completely go through, it has to go through each generation. So the generation has to go through. So that's why every line is like about 70 years. And as I was mentioning the lines, each line has like the 1, it starts the foundation. So that's the beginning. And then 2, it's like all these transitions. And then 6 is like the ending. So that's why we're in the 6th epoch of this as well. Hope you're sticking with me. I know this is so much. Okay, so the period of time in history, like I said, so an epoch is a period of time in history or a person's life. You know, typically one marked by events or, you know, popular characteristics. Now, I could go into so much history and I love history. I'm kind of a history buff, but I was looking to see kind of how each of these cycles work and if there's been some significant things during these times in each of these 400 periods, which of course there is. And, you know, we can look for things to define our beliefs. So, I mean, this could be causation, correlation, or coincidences. It's up to you to decide. I'm not trying to impose this on you, but I'm just saying what I've seen. So if you look at the cycles of how like kind of history works, right? So the lock is the vessel of love. And this is when the Roman Empire started. Now, Roman Empire was the most dominant empire in Europe during this time. But as you can see, as it was shifting, but before this time, it was really like, I forget how you say it, like not dualistic or polylythic views of religion. So it was like, there was more than one God. It was only during this kind of time around 300, like when Jesus Christ came in and like, about how it kind of shifted into this monolithic concept of religion where there was one God that we would worship. And so as you can see, it's like things are shifting towards this different time and it's they're questioning themselves. And usually there's always like a pandemic or epidemic around these shifts or some major natural disaster that takes people out because it's kind of shifting the mutation. So if you kind of look at, these are just some kind of significant events. Now, the cross of Eden is about finding paradise. It's kind of like this chaos into paradise. A lot of chaotic things kind of happen, so people can find what their paradise, or what they considered love or peace. So if you look at the incarnation cross of the overall energy, at the start of this, it split the Roman Empire. And then I said, like, each cycle kind of lasts about 100 years. It has to go through this transition. So when the Roman Empire fell, but during this time too, it was like the Mayans really came into this. This started the whole Mayan civilization, and that lasted for about 500 years. And then, but during this time, during the cross of Eden is when it was really coming into, like, Christianity really started taking off towards the end here. And that's why in the cross of rulership, when it shifted, that's where all the crusades began in history. That was like when Christianity pretty much went into war against everyone. They were trying to establish their authority. And that's what the cross of rulership is. It's really trying to establish your authority, but it's not supposed to be a dominating power. So when we're in these kind of cycles, there can be a true self and a not self. So there's going to be good and bad that comes with every kind of civilization. I hope that makes sense. And if you are somebody that doesn't believe in duality, okay, I don't know what to say to relate to that, but it's really kind of just how there's always a light and a shadow to things. So the cross of rulership is not supposed to be about imposing your authority or imposing your dominance. It's supposed to be like power through love and power through grace. But of course, if something's in a shadow state, like how Christianity basically killed millions of people to impose their authority, it was obviously that the energy itself was not in a light stage. So that's how you can kind of see it. Now, oops, I'm not done. Okay, so when we shifted from the cross of rulership to the cross of consciousness, this is exactly when the European witch trial started during this whole entire time. And then, the Crusades ended because, okay, Christianity took over. They established the rulership, they established the authority. But then when the cross of consciousness comes in, cross of consciousness has to do with, like, what is a soul? It's really kind of investigating what the soul is and what does it mean to be this enlightened person, and finding your connection in spirituality in a way. So it's not surprising that this is when Christianity really took the dominance by saying, nope, your soul is not witchcraft. It's not, if you don't give up your soul to God, you're going to die and have sin. And that's why they went over it. It's really quite ironic to see how it kind of works during this time. Now, when it goes out, we go into the cross of planning. This has to do with the building of, and this is the one that we currently are in. This has to do with the building of society, bargains, government structures, cities. So it's no surprise that that's when America started being settled, and we started creating these kind of societies and structures and making these promises and creating these bargains. And this is really where, like, the industrial time obviously came in, because the cross of planning also has to do with technology and innovation. And now within these cycles, there's nothing simple. The planets are going to have an impact on this, which Neptune has a big role in it, but I'm not going to go into Neptune, but I am going to go into Pluto. And Pluto transitions around every 252 years. And every time Pluto makes a little turn here and goes in its full cycle, there is some kind of mutation that happens, supposedly, genetically. Now, in 1781, Uranus was discovered, and that was the last cycle that we went into Pluto. So Pluto also switches in 2027. And when it switches into 2027, it's going to come into gate 41, which gate 41, each gate has to do with a codon and our genetic coding. So gate 41 is the start codon. So if you guys are all familiar with genetics at all, it has to do with, like, that's kind of the initiation of a genetic mutation. Now, this is, so basically the shift from 2027 and this mutation that's occurring, and which I'm going to be discussing, and why a lot of these changes are coming, is because when Uranus was discovered, with this shift of Pluto, it actually mutated our bodies. Now, I am studying genetics right now, and so you better believe that once I really do fully learn it, I am going to be doing some major research on this to see if what kind of transitions happen. Now, understand that every generation has some kind of mutation. That's why we are divided into generations, is because usually there's some SNPs, they call them, that are significant to that generation. That's how they determine it. So about every 36 years, like, you'll see, like, there is some kind of, like, usually some kind of element that shifts that mutation in our genetic code. I'm not talking about human design, I'm thinking like literal science. Okay, so anyways, Pluto when that happened, it supposedly shifted us from the 7-center beings to these 9-center beings. Now, this has to do with chakras, you guys, and most people that have done energy work realize like there's not just 7 chakras in our body. There's like, I think the last number I heard was 114, but it's always been focused on these huge 7 centers. But human design says, okay, well, those 7 centers actually turned to 9. Like we mutated in this way, and we shifted from these 7-center beings to these 9-center beings. It went from Saturninian to Uranian bodies, because back in the day, like around the 80s, the average lifespan was about 30. Today, the average lifespan is about 80. Saturn is a cycle of 30 years. Uranus is a cycle of 84 years. So that's why supposedly our lifespan has expanded, because it's gone with the planetary systems. Now, this also started the mutation of the emotional solar plexus, which is this homie right here, this little guy here. And this is our emotional centers. This is how we process emotions, how we feel, how we connect to spirit. It's an awareness center, kind of. It's going to be mutating into a full weird awareness center, but it's also a motor because it provides us the fuel for emotions. It provides our feelings. So there is a mutation that's occurring in the center that's going to bring it to an emotional spirit awareness. This is why the rise of spirituality has supposedly been coming through, is because of this center. Oh, there we go. Okay. And with that too, so they say that in 1781, we transitioned from Homo sapiens to Homo transitoriousness or something like that. They say that we are not the same people before 1781. Everybody that was a Saturn body or the Saturnian body, they really had these very structured and strategic ways of thinking. And we have these strict belief systems, and everything was very based in this logic, structured, organized way. With the shift of this 9-center being, it has opened us up to this thing called the right arrows. Now, when you get your chart, you'll see like left and right. And it's kind of like how you process information. So with this mutation also brought in the right arrows. And so this right way of thinking, this different way of thinking and seeing things. And so the left has to do, if you have somebody that when you get your chart, if you have a lot of L's or left, like, so I'm 100% left, which means like how I learn and how I absorb information, really, I look at things from the past to see, okay, here's the pattern. Is history going to repeat itself? Yep, I see this pattern. This is how it's going to turn out if we don't change it. So it's kind of being able to look at it. Now, the right kind of takes everything in and says, what could happen in the possibility of the future? Let's not worry about the past. The past is gone. Let's just focus on the future. So, and it's interesting because it's a lot of people that are right have a more enlightened kind of internal system usually. So it's the right brain, and it's not what you think about like left and right brain. It is different when it comes to human design. But the rights are more about positivity, enlightenment, spiritual awareness, because with these right in the 4 to 6 lines, which is the higher triangle, which means that people that have a lot of 4 to 6s in their chart, these are also people that are very will have a little bit more intuition and have this more spiritual drive. This also, so this they same with this mutation, it brought this increase of psychic abilities, because I did read that said like, oh, before 1781 people didn't have psychic abilities. I don't believe that for a second, but it's just saying that it increased it, which was ironic that the rise of spiritualism, which happened in 1848. I don't know if you guys know the story of the Fox sisters, but the Fox sisters were these 2 girls that started basically the whole rise of spiritualism. They were the first mediums per se that really came into the mainstream. I mean, the spiritualism was a huge deal back in the 1900s. In fact, I recently learned that like Harry Houdini actually tried to get psychics outlawed. He went to Congress to try to pass a law to not allow psychics to be able to practice. But of course, Congress was like, we don't really give a shit about this, so let them do what they want to do. So it was kind of funny to see, to hear that story, because you would think a magician would be like all for it, but he hated mediums because he thought that they were all like, he thought they were all fake, basically, because he was very close to his mother, and when his mother died, he really wanted to reconnect with her, but he never found that connection. So anyways, that's kind of going off on a tangent, but it's interesting anyways to see how the rise of spiritualism has increase during this time. Now, so as we go into 2027, so this is what's kind of going on and how this is going to be shifting. Right now, in 1961, we switched from, as I mentioned, each line, so those 1 through 6 lines, shift every 70 years. And when those lines, each of those lines carry also an energetic theme. So in 1961, we shifted to a line 1. Now, if you are somebody that has a line 1 in your profile, or if you have a lot of line 1s in your chart, you will feel like you belong in this time. Like, it's like things like, you feel like, yeah, this is the time I was born for. And you're going to feel, but you might be feeling like this kind of shift coming, because like we're going to be shifting from line 1 to line 6. If you are a line 6, or you have a lot of line 6s in your chart, you may be feeling like, I feel like I should have been born during a different time. Like you haven't been able to fit kind of, or find your place in the world, because like you have different views. A line 1 to a line 6 is completely different. So the basis of a line 1 is about investigation. It's finding the truth, like knowing, having a secure foundation. We do everything based in our survival instincts of like, where can we be safe? Where can we establish these foundations? And let's investigate what everybody's kind of talking about and see what's true, right? So it had a lot, it's a very science-driven area, like energy and investigation energy. Line 6 is actually above all the other lines. So what I mean by that is like, we shift from line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if you're comparing it to a house, everybody lines 1 through 5, they all live in the same house. They're inside, but each of them are on a different level. Once you get to line 6 is like, yeah, I don't really want to live with you people. And so they move up to the roof. So they've kind of, it's very Buddha type energy. It's like people with line 6s have this energy that is called the role model, because part of their purpose is to be here and to embody themselves, is to be whatever their experience, or is like whatever they came here to do. It's not about just doing it, it's about being it. They become the embodiment of themselves and what their purpose is in life. And so they don't really care about people like following them. They don't care about, like, they're not looking to be gurus, but it's more like Buddha, where like just them being them. And when they come into their true self, people just seem to migrate to them and they want to follow them. It's very like Dalai Lama energy, right? So it's like Dalai Lama wasn't like, I want all my followers to come here and follow me. People just followed him because they liked his principles and they liked who he was. I don't know if Dalai Lama is a line 6 though, so, but it's just, that's a good example of it. So with that being said, why there's such a dramatic shift of what's going on? So not only are we going from line 1 to line 6, so that means that in 2027, if you are a line 6, you're going to feel completely different. You're going to feel like, yeah, this is my freaking time. So like, you guys, I'm a line 6, so I'm super excited for 2027, because I'm like, yeah, because I have felt that way my entire life. Like I've always like, I feel like I was born in the wrong era. Like I'm like, always like, I was born in like, I feel like I should have been born like 200 years ago. Just my principles and my beliefs and all that stuff too. Also, line 6 is a lot to do with perfectionism. So of like, because it's not that in the way of like perfectionism in a negative term, it's more about like wanting to see the beauty in everything. And this like wherever there's ugliness, like, let's just fix that. Let's just make it pretty. Let's make it perfectly beautiful. And that's a very line 6 energy too. So there's a lot of perfectionism that's going to come out during this time too. On top of that, we are switching from the incarnation cross of planning to the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. These are 2 dramatically different incarnation crosses. So as I mentioned, the cross of planning is, first of all, a tribal circuitry. So this means when it's tribal, it's all about sacrificing for others. It's about sacrificing for the tribe. We work so we can support our family and support our children and give them money and have them grow. We can work these, we rely on government when we can't get what we need, because we expect them to support us. We created these societies and these hospitals and these religions that we can turn to for support. And it's become this very communal kind of society. Well, the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix is called individual circuitry, and it's actually integration circuitry on top of that, which is super, super, super about themselves. So we are going from tribal to the self-expression of self. So basically what's to come and the predictions involved in that, it's going to shift, starting off with gate 55-6. That's a huge part of it. So one thing about the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix, like the best way I can kind of explain like the energy behind it, it's super spiritual and but it's super involved with the self as well. But when it's in a shadow state, so some famous people that had the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. So if you want to think about the not self, or when someone's not fully living their potential, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, those are two very, very famous people that have the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. When you are in your enlightened self, a really good example of this is Mother Teresa. She also had the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. So because the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix is really about coming into the spiritual connection, and it has to do a lot with spirituality, but it also has to do with intimacy and this theme of busyness. So we're shifting right now from that gate 37, which is about like inner peace and harmony, and again, supporting community, to gate 55-6. 55-6 is called abundance with selfishness when it's aligned 6 theme. So 55 is where we're going to be mutating. When I talk about that emotional solar plex mutating, it's this gate alone that's going to be mutating and bringing us into this awareness. Because abundance has been like, okay, we get abundance so we can bring it back into the community, right? So that's what the community channel is about, where we've been. This is more about like abundance through spirituality. So once you become connected into your spirituality and this consciousness, it's what's going to bring abundance. So as a global theme, when it's called exalted, this is being if we're in our light, and when the energy is benefiting us, it's called acquisition, obsession through alienating, is still indirectly beneficial material to others, the possibility of finding spirit through materialism. So what that means is each person's going to kind of focus on themselves, find their self, become in this inner enlightenment, and then when you fill your cup, it's going to overflow into everybody else's cup. So if you think about like capitalism, right now, capitalism is really in this detriment kind of stage. So when you think about the billionaires of this planet, a lot of them are very about themselves. Like, we're going to build rockets and go into space and not care about, like, everybody else in the population. To each his own. But I mean, if you think about all the billionaires in this world right now, right, they could basically, if they were to split the money of what every single person had made, like everybody would have this like balanced income. Nobody would be in poverty, but they don't, they keep it for themselves. So that's like the detriment stage, is where the material abundance exists, but no one gets to share its light. There's the new moon phase called the possibility that materialism becomes obsessive with a mean spirit that will not share. So that's greed, the selfishness, and the wanting to get all the money and bringing it in, and that's all they care about. Doesn't care if it benefits everybody else. So that's when the cup overflows, and it overflows into their own plate versus sharing it with others. So you can kind of already see that happening, right? Like, this is really going to be, now in the word selfishness, so it's kind of like, obviously selfishness is a negative term, but it's not really supposed to be that way. It's more about like the whole purpose of the integration channel is really about, once you learn yourself and once you can be selfish and take care of your needs, is the only time that you're going to be able to help other people. Okay. So it's like, you have to be selfish for a little bit to figure out yourself, take some time, figure out who you are, become your authentic self. And when you become that authentic self is when you're going to be able to help other people, because you're no service to other people if you don't even know who you are. Right. So that's really what it comes about. It's like, this gives you permission to be selfish, take some time for yourself, figure out who it is. What is your purpose here? What is it that you want to do? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? And then you become that person and you bring it out to the society. Okay. So with this mutation, it's also going to be obviously why there's a rise in spirituality with individuals, because this is where our emotional centers, those feelings and those things, is going to come into the spiritual consciousness. It's going to be this awareness of spiritual and universal consciousness. So with that, it's really going to be coming into the authentic self and being ones with our bodies. So it's supposed to be really learning to understand how our bodies work, how we have an inner authority in our body, listening to that kind of gut feeling or intuition, or I'm trying to think of the other authorities off the top of my head. So it's kind of like, or listening to that inner self, and where, and listening to it and letting it guide you. Okay. So how we take care of our bodies is going to change, and how we heal ourselves is going to change, which we've already seen that movement as well. There's been a lot of different medical advancements, obviously, in the last few years. But you can see with the rise of like sound healing, or finding different modalities, or people looking for other sources other than just Western medicine. And this is because we're trying to learn our bodies and figuring out what can really heal us. I mean, there's a lot of theories out there that we're able to heal our own bodies without having to go into Western medicine. But for the love of Pete, if you have something wrong with you, please check a doctor. I'm not telling you not to do that. Okay. So doctors are there for a reason. We have medical people for a reason. But it's always about looking at like different modalities and seeing like, hey, if Western medicine isn't working for you, there's other ways, and we're trying to find those ways, right? There's a lot of energy healing, and Western medicine is also bringing in alternative theories. I mean, Reiki is becoming really part of Western medicine. There's a lot of hospitals now that are using it, especially with cancer patients. I mean, can you imagine like 20 years ago, if someone with Reiki tried to go into Johns Hopkins University, they'd be like, what? Like, but now it's like, yeah, sure, come on in, let's do this. And now they've been doing a lot of studies on it. Now with this change, of course, from communal to individual, it's going to be breaking down the societies. It's basically saying, like, if you think about a phoenix is, I'm sure most people realize, but a phoenix is a bird, it's a mystical bird that burns itself and dies into ashes to be reborn. So if you're looking at it from a literal sense, it's like everything has to kind of crash and burn to be reborn. So everything is going to become crashing down and burning around us. So that's why they think about, you know, I'll kind of go into what's been going on and how this relates to everything. But those government structures, questioning society, those hospitals, the reliance of government is going to be is going to go. That's what they're saying. Oh, bye-bye. So it's like everything that we're used to doing and used to being is going to really we're going to have to figure out how to survive for ourselves. The way we change, like how we bond with each other, is also going to change, because there's a channel, 1949, that's going to actually become, basically going to break that channel. So if this is the channel you have now, there is going to be a mutation in there that basically that channel is not going to exist anymore. Now that channel is called synthesis, and that has to do with how we bond with these people, how intimacy, how we create contracts, how we bond with our animals. It's actually a cross-species channel, meaning this channel actually has to do with this agreement we came up with domesticated animals that, hey, we'll provide you shelter if you provide us food. So with that, there's going to say that there's going to be a shift in agriculture because of how we produce our animal, because right now, I mean, and that's actually been a big thing too lately, of how we treat our animals in agriculture and farming, right? Because that's why like cage-free chickens have become a big deal, or how do we treat them? Like putting them on these pens and not allowing them to really become themselves or live how they're supposed to live, it causes a shift in their bodies. And then they say that food is what causes problems for us, because there's hormonal changes in there and they change their psychology of the animal, and that we're eating that. If you really look into, it's kind of disturbing if you look into it, to be honest, but it's, but that's all being put into question right now. And there's a lot of things, even with I literally just listened to this story the other day about horses. Like, I honestly didn't even know there was wild horses still out there, but I guess there is a huge population of wild horses. And it's been an issue because us capturing those wild horses when they're going to overpopulation, what they do is, it's really sad. They take these horses and they put them in this pen, and then they just ship them off into these captivity areas. They separate them from their families, and it causes a lot of psychological problems with these horses. However, they have figured out in California that this may be the reason why we're having wildfires, is because the horses are not, the population of these horses being shifted. They can help with, they eat the grass or the brush or whatever that causes these wildfires. So they're trying to do this movement where not to capture the horses, but kind of remigrate them around. It's quite fascinating. Okay, so anyways, so there is going to be this, they say they don't know what's going to happen with this agreement once it's broken with the animals, but there's some theories that, your pets might run away or try to run away during this time. Mine, of course, never would, because they love me so much. But if they, but the relationship, that domestication of animals is going to change. It'll be, they don't really say what that looks like, but there is going to be a difference. There are other cross species. And so if the other cross species channels, maybe they'll override this one, which the other ones are about 1222 is about bonding with your animal. And if you have 1222, your animals will look to you as your BFF, and they want to be your friend, and they just want to love you. If it's 1762, this is more about training the animal and giving them a job to do, and these are the animals that really want to be of service. So, there are, the way we connect with them, perhaps we'll just have a lot more respect from them, and maybe they'll have a lot more respect for us. That would be amazing. So now, again, another shift that's going to happen with gate 59. So gate 55, there's a programming partner to every gate. And the programming partner with 55 is 59. 59 has to do with sexuality, how we reproduce. So again, there's going to be these mutations. I just wanted to check on time really quick. There's going to be this mutation. And then with that is causing this lower birth rate because the human population is eventually going to fade out, basically. We're transitioning into this new species that's supposedly coming through. Again, not going to happen in our lifetime, but the lower birth rate is going to be affecting how many humans. And like they say that most likely if you reincarnate, you won't reincarnate as a human. Also, since we're breaking down these societies and these structures, religion is going to be a huge role in this. And then they're saying that eventually the whole concept of one God is going to go out the door, which you can see that as well, because there has been a lot of shift in religion. Of course, they say this plays a role in why the church has been really put into question. This is also why there's been a huge wave of people coming back into witchcraft and like Wicca and stuff like that. Those religions and these shamanic views and all this stuff has really grown because it's going back into this concept of these polylythic gods, or more there being a universal creation. Lastly, another is the emergence of a new species. I'm trying to think of how to word this in a way where, so starting February 15th, 2027, there's gonna be something called the Rave Children that are gonna be coming in. So, and these are not humans, but so we are Homo sapiens. Obviously, there was a time where there was more than one human in this world. Back in the day, there used to be 15 different species of humans. I mean, can you imagine if today we were living with 15 different species of humans? Like people would, I can't even imagine how people would treat each other. But obviously, and like, so that was like the Neanderthals, you know, like they were a different species, but they were still a part of the Homo genius. So the Rave Children will be part of that genius. So they're still going to be Homo, but they're going to be Homo Ravenous or something like that, the technical term. So it'll be a different species. I did look into this to see like how are species created per se. And usually there has to be some kind of event that happens that causes this isolation that shifts the mutation of humans. I don't think that's going to happen in the next 5 years, maybe. Like if that would be like, so basically it was saying that there would have to be something that would cut off this global connection. It would have to be like, if there was like some kind of natural disaster that would not allow us to travel internationally for a while. And so everybody, like, let's say like the US got cut off from the rest of the world. Everybody that lived in the US would eventually turn into a different species because our bodies would start to, of course, it has to do with evolution. So if you don't believe in theory of evolution, this might be something you don't resonate with it. But if you don't believe in evolution, I'm going to be very blunt and say, you need to go back to school, because evolution is something that, whether you believe it or not, I'm sorry, but it drives me nuts when I hear people say like evolution doesn't exist. I believe in like we are created from a higher source as well. There can be like, it doesn't have to be that we were only created from God and that evolution doesn't exist. There is proven, very much proven statistical, like you can see it happening in your body that we have mutations and we do change, we genetically change. Why that happens, that's to be determined. So that's where I'm saying like geneticists will say this wouldn't be possible unless there's some like major event that happens that causes us to be in isolation. But we don't know that for sure exactly how genetics work. So maybe something else can happen that's causing this shift. That's what I mean by that. So I hope that makes sense. So here's the evidence. Yes, I put the world on fire because that's how I feel like our life has been. Not to be negative, but you know, when it's 100 degrees in Denver every freaking day, I'm like, feels like it's on fire. So as you can see, so these are some of the predictions that Ra talked about in his last presentation, which is why I'm like, ooh, this is creepy because this information is true. So first of all, he talked about the emergence of an epidemic, which he wasn't the first one. He wasn't the only one that talked about this. Okay, the coronavirus, the timing is ironic because like I said, every 7 years, like there's some kind of shift. So, but he did speak of like this pandemic coming that we weren't going to be prepared for. And it was going to like cause a huge, it was going to make a huge impact on our healthcare system, which yeah, basically is what happened. So that was one thing that he discussed. And I said, he's not the only one. There was a lot of people that talked about a pandemic coming eventually. But the thing is that with this emergence of this and the changing of that 1949 channel and how we're taking care of our bodies, more and more epidemics are going to come through a lot quicker. They talk about, like, basically there's going to be we're going to find diseases in animals that we weren't aware of, which there are over 80,000 different zootopic diseases in the world. That means that transfer from animal to human. So 80,000 different viruses that we could potentially get from animals if we're messing with them around, so that's just something to keep in mind. So that's not surprising, right? Increase of natural and man-made disasters. This is also something that's evident throughout time as well. So coincidence, I don't know, but obviously with the rise of the climate. Now, there is a theory that the climate change is like, when there's a mutation happening in the genetic code, it requires heat. That's something I just heard about. I don't know if that's true or not, so don't quote me on that, but that's just what I read, that's the reason why this heat, like the heating up of the world is kind of happening right now, because it's required with this mutation. Again, coincidence, synchronicity, we don't know. As I already mentioned, this distrust in the government organizations, like, the attack on the January 6th, again, whether you believe that happened or not, or whatever theory you have on it, that's beside the point. But it's showing like this, that hasn't happened in ever, really. I mean, it did happen around Lincoln, but that was like, it never actually went through this full attack on our Capitol. So it's kind of insane that actually happened. But you can see the breakdown, the bipartisanship that's going on in the world. This like democracy is basically a mess. And that kind of has to do with a lot of this individual self. There has been lower birth rates. This is something that's been talked about numerous times, about how our birth rate has dramatically decreased throughout the world. That if it goes the way that it continues, that there won't be enough people to support us when we get old, like me, like no babies means no social security for me. I'm like, what? So that's, again, where we're going to have to, those government systems are going to fail if we don't find a way to bring in that income, right? The prostate has to do with the mutation center, so that the prostate is connected to the emotional center, emotional solar plexus. So he talks about there'd be an increase in prostate cancer, which oops, this is, I see an error. I'm sorry about that, you guys. So this decrease of empathy and increase of narcissism is supposed to be on a new line. Sorry about that. But just to see like how much it has increased, and they have no idea why prostate cancer has increased. They're like, we don't know why, it just has. So it's kind of crazy that he did predict that, and it's coming. Decrease of empathy and increase of narcissism. Since around 2000, there has been a decrease in empathy and a huge increase of narcissism. And like I said, like that incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix, it's about individuals. If you're in a shadow state, that is narcissism, a sociopath. That's people that are going to only be for themselves and care about themselves and not care about anybody else. So again, that's just another, whether it be causation, correlation, whatever, but that is a huge part of that too. Now, lastly, the increase of autism. Now, I want to be careful on how I talk about this, because autism is a very, very big thing right now, and there's a reason why, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, why there's autism and increasement. But there has been a huge increase. Now, there's two reasons that could be, because it could be that, yes, autism is becoming more prevalent, but also diagnosing autism has changed dramatically in the last few years. It's become, they've kind of, they included it to be on a spectrum. So autism is kind of like, you could be on the lower end of the spectrum and not have full-blown autism, or, you know, if you're on the other end, then this is like where what you think of like as autism, like when it's like the lack of like this emotional, what's the word I'm looking for? Lack of emotions, or it's not like, yeah, anyways, okay, you guys know what autism is. I'm not going to go too much into that because I don't want to overstep on that. But I'm just saying, like, the reason why this is because, and he didn't say too that it's like, he didn't say the reason why autism was going to raise. So if it is a diagnosis thing, I mean, it still kind of falls into line with it. He wasn't like, oh, it's because of this and this and this, but it has increased dramatically. And that has to do because of the Rave children. Okay, that's what he talks about. So the Rave children, and this is why it's important and why he really wanted to bring human design out, because he wants people to find these children, which in a way, I'm like, that's gonna, like, you know, I feel bad for the people that are gonna be like obsessively looking for these children when they're born. But so first of all, they start in February 15, 2027 is when the first child should be, they say, will be born. It's going to be very, very little in the beginning. Of course, when a generation comes through, it's going to grow and grow, but that's why we'll see a decrease in this human supposed species and increase in the Rave. So the Rave children are going to look human and they're going to appear human, but they're not going to be human and they're not going to act like they're human. They say that when they're born, people and parents are probably going to freak out and think there's something wrong with their child because they're going to appear to the very high end of this of autism. Like they're going to feel like they're going to basically come off as like having severe autism disorder or being almost like in a way mentally handicapped, but they're not. They're just not going to know that. So basically they will come off with this social detachment from people, hypersensitive skin, problems with speech. They're not going to be interested in communicating with humans because that's not what they're here for. They're going to have poor eyesight because they're going to see things differently than us, and this lack of desire for knowledge because they're already going to possess this resource of being able to get knowledge. So basically what happens is that they're going to be born without like a consciousness. They're going to be born with a universal consciousness. So what happens is that these Rave children have to come together to become alive. It's like, so they will appear as like I said, like this, like maybe like a mentally handicapped child, but the moment they become next to their other Rave child, they will appear completely different. So they will basically come alive because it's kind of like activating this consciousness. Now, if anybody's seen the movie Minority Report, this would be a really good example of what I mean by the penta. So in that movie, it talks about the cognates and how these three children come together. When they came together, they were able to see the future. They were tapped into this consciousness and be able to predict when people were going to kill other people. And so then they would share that, and they would do it through kind of sensory. They tapped them up to this screen or whatever, and they would show these precog police when someone was gonna. It's actually a really good movie. You should watch it. But that's basically how the Rave is going to be. It's a really good example. It's going to be like these. Once they come together, it will activate their consciousness, and they will basically be this universal. So when they say like their problems with speech is because they aren't going to communicate. They don't need to communicate. It's going to be like telepathic communication to each other, and they'll have no interest in socializing with us because humans are basically going to be below them. Okay, they're going to be a higher consciousness, even though they won't appear that way until they get together. They say problems, poor eyesight, is because they'll be able to see. They're going to see in frequencies. So it's like they're not going to have normal eyesight. It's kind of like a bat, like how they, it's a sonic wave. So they'll be able to see things on this different plane. If you like, they say in the quantum physics, it talks a lot about like how there's different planes. We can only see up to what we have for our spectrum of vision. And we don't see the full spectrum of colors. Like birds see UV lighting, we don't see that, right? So they're going to be able to see everything else. Like they say, like if fairies exist, right, that they exist on a different plane. They're here around us. We just don't see them because we can't see the color they are, or these, these mystical creatures. But the Rave will be able to see them. They'll be able to see everything. It's kind of like how visioning, like, a dog doesn't see the world the same way that we do. So they're just going to see it in a different light, but it's going to think that humans are judgy. We're going to be like, oh, there must be something wrong with them, but they're not going to think it that way. Now, what I mean by this lack of knowledge for desire for knowledge is because they won't need it. Once they tap into each other, they're basically going to have like this connection with the universal knowledge. Like they'll be able to figure out whatever they want by just tapping in with each other and get access to that, which is, I think, is kind of cool, right? But the reason why is because, so these children and the Rave is what we're supposed to be transitioning into. And that's why the 9 center beings are supposed to be Raves. And that's why we're in the between this. And the Rave children eventually will transition into these 11 center beings that will basically be a universal consciousness. So that's why all this shift is happening, like why we're supposed to be tapping into each other, into our bodies. And I hope that makes sense. So what is the role of human design? Why did this come out, right? What is the role of this? So the reason why is because human designs is for humans. It's not for Raves. It's not for these other consciousness. It's for us, because as we go through these challenging times, human design provides the guide or the map of how you're supposed to live your life. It's supposed to help you during this time. So like, again, like if you're line 6, it's going to help you figure out why you don't feel right with the world until why you're going to switch into that, like why things are feeling weird for you in the next few years. Like if your energy's been off in your line 6, it's because you're transitioning into your time. So, or if you're line 1, things are going to start feeling off because like you've been so used to how things are and you're going to want to go back to that. it tells you about what your authority is, because like I was talking about, like getting in touch with your body. What is your inner consciousness? How do you become yourself? That's what the role of human design is coming in. So that's what it's about. So the main reason why I wanted to present this was that to announce the fact that I know Awkwardly Zen, if you guys are a member, if you're not, uh-oh. Am I there? Did I freeze? Am I good? Okay, I'm good. I was like, the Awkwardly Zen's been talking about bringing courses, and I'm the guinea pig for the courses. So I was hoping to have the courses done today. But if you guys know about human design, not even from this, it's like, there's a little bit of information that comes along with it. So I have been just nonstop recording for you guys. And I pretty much lost my voice at a point where I'm like, okay, need to take a break. So the course is not done yet, but they will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. So if you are interested in this, I'm basically going to be creating a hub for people that do want to know about human design. There's going to be a mastermind course where it's like basically an intensive that will provide everything you need to know about human design, from like little baby steps to everything. So like if you wanted to be a reader or be able to help with other people's charts, you'll be able to do this. Or if you want to just know your design, you'll be able to go in and just say, okay, I'm a generator. What is a generator? Let me know. Or I'm this profile, and you can click on that. So if you are interested in that and you want to sign up for the notification of when that course will be available, that's the link, awkwardlyzen.com/human-design, just fill out that form. And when the course is available, I'll send you an email with a little discount code for signing up early. And if you are interested in reading, obviously I give readings if you want to know your chart. And if you are a member, those are the discounts. And that's where you can get a reading. If you don't want to, I'm totally okay with that too. It's up to you. You decide what you want to do. You do you. So I think, yeah, that's about it. I'm going to open up for questions now.
That's all. Just all that information all at once. That's it. That was great. Thank you. Beautiful. So I am going to open it up for questions. You guys can raise your hands. I'll turn off the unmute here in just a second. While we're waiting for people to think of their questions, Charity, can you kind of give a synopsis again about how those crosses relate to the cycles that you're talking about?
So the crosses, the incarnation crosses, is basically the background frequency. It's kind of the energy that's going on, like how each gate plays a role. So let me just do this really quick too. So if we are talking about, go here, right? Okay. So each of these crosses have 4 gates. Okay, that's what makes up the crosses. And this is like, I talked more about this one, the Sleeping Phoenix, but there is the cross of penetration too. But this has to do with direction. This is about how we love and how we communicate and interact with the people here. That's why they've been focusing a lot on this one here. So each of these gates play a role, and that's what will be shifting. So as I mentioned, 55 is that abundance. That's where the mutation's happening. And with that programming partner 59 is why when we bond, like, I didn't mention this actually, now just bring that up. So like 59 will influence like divorce or how we connect or how do we want to have our sexual relationships with each other. And that's why the whole like lower birth rate, or maybe not wanting to have babies necessarily, but just kind of, and the rise of polygamy, this is kind of has to do with 59, because it's more about the 6 is called 59, 6 is called one night stand. So it's like somebody that doesn't really care about the intimate connection. They're just kind of looking for that experimentation with their sexuality. And 3420 is a channel altogether. So we're going from like 9 is about focusing, right? So everything's been in logic and detail and researching and what are the skills that we have and coming up with innovation. 3420 is like, let's get shit done, son. It's like about this busyness. So the world is going to be on this faster pace of like busyness and wanting to like figure out what is that we need to do, what we need to do with our purpose, and how quickly can we get that done. So it's really about, but the charisma is also about this individual energy. So that's where that shifting from how the circuitry works, because all of this, like 3740 is literally called, why is my thing bleeping out? Okay, sorry. I don't know why. Am I bleeping out or is it?
You're freezing a little bit, but we can still hear you.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I don't know why. I'm like,
okay.
I wonder if I switch my, but the whole point is like 37 is called community because it's about tribal energy. But 3420, when we're switching that channel, 3420 is all about integrated selfness. Like, it's like, what's happening to me now? Where is my power? How do I exert my power? And how do I do it now? So that's why the crosses play such an influential role in the background frequency, because it's going to enforce that kind of energy. And it's really going to be interesting to see, like with the next election coming up, how these crosses will play and role in that. I mean, because even that, I'm not going to go into, I was going to say something, I'm not going to go into politics right now, but you know, too much controversy already. I don't need to go, we don't need to take that route. But either way, and so like with the cross of the Maya and it's like our direction of where we're heading and where we're going to be doing, like the Maya really has to do with like a universe. The Maya is called what human design call what Maya is like universal energy. So right now the incarnation cross of the Maya really has to do like how your role in the universe and like how you work with universal energy versus penetration. It's really what you think about is like kind of your direction is pushing you into how do you like penetrate, like how do you it's another word for penetration, how do you force yourself into the world, like how do you come into the world? So like your direction is really going to be about making that stance and really becoming into who you are. So that's why, I mean, and why there's a negativeness to it is obviously because the shadow state of the cross of the sleeping phoenix, like I said, is super narcissistic and selfish and doesn't give a shit about anybody. And sorry, excuse my language, but the people with those right brains and want that more positive energy is going to be like, but it's about empowerment and individual empowerment and enlightenment. And it is, and that is exactly how it is. It's like it said, it's Mother Teresa versus Ted Bundy. Who do you want to be? I don't know. So that's really, I really hope you want to be Mother Teresa. But anyways, with that being said, so it's either way, it's really about these background frequencies that kind of influence how society shapes itself. And like, I would love to just, I could spend freaking hours on just going through each cross and saying, oh, why do I keep freezing?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, I know, but it's so frustrating.
I know.
Okay. Anyway, so that's kind of how it works. I'm just wondering if my internet's going to crash. I live in a really weird area, you guys, where it's like, I should have the best internet in the world, but I'm in a dead zone according to Comcast. Anyways, okay, so any other questions?
We don't have any in the chat yet. Does anybody have a question they want to
ask?
I
got one here directly to me.
Okay, good.
How many different designs are there? Okay, so there are 4 different types of people, or 4 different types. So there's manifestors, generators, projectors, and reflectors. And then after 2027, there'll be rave. Even though that really won't be a kind of a type, but sorry. And so Palmer, they obviously want to join in on the presentation. I don't even know why they're barking. Anyways, so sorry, 1 second. Anyways, there are 4 different types. So there's manifestors, generators, projectors, and reflectors. And they are manifestors about 10% of the population, which they're more of like the initiators and the creators. Generators are 70% of the population, but within generators, there's manifesting generators, and manifesting generators are like a subset of generators. So they kind of have this a little bit of extra superpower, but they're still generators. So that's why they don't divide those types. And then projectors are here for the guides, and they're the newest type. They came around in 1781, and that's about 20% of the population. And then less than 1% of the populations are reflectors. And reflectors are more about, they're a very unique type. And if you are a reflector, you probably have had a lot of struggles to deal with because you're picking up on everybody's energy, and it's really about here to sample everybody else's energy and learn how to guide that. I can go into reflectors right now, but I'm not going to because I'll go off on a tangent. And so I hope that helps.
Yeah, let me read this comment in the chat. I feel like some people could be fearing the planned obsolescence extinction of humanity due to this shift. But the fact that we have incarnation crosses makes me think we are here to actually assist with the easier integration of the new into the old. Is that something that resonates based on your research?
Absolutely, 100%. So if you're aligned, so let me say it this way, if you're aligned 6, like I said, so like I'm a 3-6, okay, so that's, oh, and I know that someone was saying about the types too. Okay, so I'm told I'm a manifestor, investigator. Sorry, somebody privately messaged me that. So what I mean by that is like, when I talked about the types, each of your type is kind of like, your type has to do with your purpose, like your strategy and your authority, okay? And then you have something called a profile, and there's 12 different profiles. So you can be a 1-3, a 2-4, a 3-6, a 4-6, a 6-2, whatever. So it goes in that way. So with that profile is your archetype energy. So that's kind of like the role that you play. It's the script that you're given and what you're supposed to, how you're supposed to integrate with that. And that has to do with your incarnation cross as well. So depending on these profiles and stuff, now anybody that's a line 6 really is supposed to be helping people integrate these changes. So I find it ironic with me. I was really interested when I found out I was a 3-6, and that because human design like literally haunted me. I didn't seek it out. It like literally stopped me out. Like it just kept popping up, and I'm like, I first started doing it. I'm like, this is too much. It was like hurting my brain, but then it was like, but you're going to learn me. So it just kept popping up and popping up and popping up. And finally I just gave into it. And then I realized as a 3-6, it really has to do with this, as a line 6, really helping people transition over into who they can be. And so your purpose of your cross is absolutely can play a role in that. But your incarnation cross is your purpose of being. So on an individual level, incarnation crosses are so intense. There's 192 of them, you guys, because it depends on what corner you're in, what your profile is, what your type, it all works differently. But you don't do anything about your cross. Like your cross works on its own. And Ra actually wasn't going to even tell anybody about the incarnation crosses because he was afraid that they'll chase after it. They'll want to figure out and see, oh my gosh, when is this working? Is it working? It's like, how do I get it to activate? And it's not supposed to work that way. It works on your own way. So I hope that makes sense. But yes, I do believe that your purpose of energy really has to do with how you integrate. And also, like I said, the profile is a huge role in that as well.
And while we're on that subject, that touches on the readings that you do and what kind of information you put together. So if people would like a little bit more detail about what comes out of that reading, like what kind of information are you going to give to them?
Just gonna get a little bit. So most people that do human design readings, and not dissing on anybody, everybody does them differently, but most of them include like an hour, and they'll just say like, hey, what's your concern? I'll tell you why this is happening in your chart. I'm going to tell you the epitome of you. So my readings are about 2 hours. And I say about because sometimes they go into 3 hours. Sometimes they go, I've had a 4-hour reading before. I try not to, that's because we go off on tangents and there's other things that are happening. I'm like, oh, let's keep talking. So everything's recorded, but I'm basically bring it down to, I structure it out where I'm going to give you the base level of who you are, and then I build on top of it. And then I say, okay, I've just downloaded you with a shit ton of information. Listen to the recording and get back to me in a week. You can text me or email me with any questions that you have about it, because there's going to be some things that are going to come up. You know, when you're being given this much information, it's going to be a little bit overwhelming. So I always say, step back, absorb it, and then let me know whatever questions you have. And I always, you know, there's not like, I don't be like, oh, you have to read book a reading with me. I give you all the answers to your questions. So it's really about that. And I also have it where if you are familiar with, you know, I have different options. So if you are familiar with human design, you know what your type is and stuff, but you still, maybe you just want to get that extra step. I do have one on there that's like, if you are familiar with it, you could book like just an hour session if you have some extra questions that you want for clarity, if you already know the basics of it, because it depends on how much you want to know. Because I am like, I kind of just word vomit for like 2 hours straight, and then you guys have to figure it out. No, I help you through it, but it's really, and then, you know, there are other things too. I'm a little different in my readings too, because I incorporate a little bit of astrology with it. I love astrology, and human design is based in astrology, but it is not the same. I want to make that very clear. There is like, because I think astrology is amazing too, and my chart has been really sessions range. So sessions are about $298 for a 2-hour session, but then you guys, there's a discount code that I kind of that's in there too, that if you're a member, you'll get anywhere from 10% off to 40% off, depending on what level of your membership is. And then if you have something where you are familiar with human design and you just want like the I said $298, Angie, I don't know if you heard that, which is like the typical amount for human design reading, but usually those are only an hour, so that's why I'm like. And then, but if you want just an hour reading, then it's $149. But that I please, as like, you know, a little bit of human design if you do something like that, because, and on the discounts, codes work for any level. Or if you have a pet, I love doing pet readings, which are $75, but you do need to know the birth date of your animal. So if you don't know it.
Yeah, and to call out, she did mine, and it was beautiful and amazing, and so much information, and so dead on about how I operate as a person. but she also identified things within my children where I could improve my communication with them or understand at least how they're operating, how they're processing information, and how our relationship interacts. And that is amazing information, especially as a parent.
And just let you guys know too, like if you, when I release the courses, I am going to do like, if you do the mastermind, that's going to include like probably about a 6-month kind of membership in with where I love, like, I want to, if anybody's been in the Zen Zooms and stuff, like how you guys talk about things, I want to start doing kind of experimentations with human design. So it's the more you dive into it, it'll be like, okay, we're going to do a discussion on if you have your ajna defined, what does that feel like for you? Or, you know, I want to do some experimenting with it from just what I've learned about it. And then as I grow to, I mean, like there's about, I don't even know, like 8 subsets to human design, like specialties, like as in a way, like there's Rave cosmology, which has to do with the mystical aspect of human design. There's the PHS system, which has to do with all your health and the 3 levels below your chart. So like when you go and you on your chart, and if you're like the top gate is like, let's say 54.1, it's actually 54.1.2.3.4. So that's how in depth it can go. And that's why it's really important for you to have like the down to the minute. There's also connection chart. So if you like relationship wise, if you want to know how you connect with somebody, or if you're having troubles in your relationship, I can look at the connection charts and say, actually, I don't have that listed right now on my services, but I should probably put that. People just ask me about it kind of, so I do it kind of like on a word to mouth basis. But it's where you can combine the 2 charts together and you can see where the difficulties are if you have challenges with them and why, or how you guys connect. And then there's also the gene keys, which is a different modality, but is more in-depth look to human design in a way. Richard Rudd, who does gene keys, does these 3 different levels of gates, and it's a different modality, but it's based in human design, but then he kind of branched off from it. And I'm trying to think what else there is. There's a lot. But so as I continue to learn and grow as well, I'm going to include those in the courses and stuff too. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, like I said. Oh, and there's also business. There's ones for business, which is what I want to start learning, which is called BG5. And that has to do with Penta energy. So that has to do with the Rave energy, but it's kind of like if you have a business or you work with like 3 to 5 people in your business, you form a different energy when you're together, and that affects how your business is ran. So it's really interesting, and I have to dive into it. I've started diving into it, but again, I'm not kidding when I say like it's not like, you know, a 30-minute course when you learn each subject. It's like,
you just got an excellent question in the chat, and it says, I'm wondering if the evolution of humanity has something to do with the increase in binary people recently.
Yeah, so the Rave are gonna not identify as a gender, so that's definitely something to do with it. I think that honestly, personally, though, also has to do with genetics, because we have lived in a society where gender has played such a role, and not in the most positive way. I mean, like, let's be honest, if you do identify as a woman, it's like for years and years and years, women were property, and we weren't even considered individuals. And then of course, you know, with that's how it was, of course, with slavery as well. But there is something that's like, I think that shifts, like where we've kind of learned the survival rate of like, if we don't identify, we're not going to be targeted. And so I believe that has a lot to do with it as well. I'm wondering, do you recommend doing? I love doing it for babies. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's so much fun. My best friend she had a baby not too long ago, and I did her chart, and I was like, oh my God, I can't wait for your daughter to grow up. I mean, because her daughter, I'm going to tell you right now, she's going to be like a force of nature. Like, you could do it for babies, absolutely. You can. It doesn't matter. But the point is, because they're not. It's actually quite well, because then you can see how they'll grow and you can watch and how they transition. But like my best friend's baby, I mean, her baby's a quad split, and she's got everything like the incarnation cross of revolution. I'm like, she's gonna freaking start, and she's gonna be an activist. I guarantee you, it's so much fun. I love it.
We just have a few minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions about what we covered today? I know it was a lot of information. Now, Charity, this slide is going to be on our website as well as the recording.
I can put it on there, I guess. Okay. Yeah. I don't, yeah, I'll put them on there. Why not? They'll probably be helpful for you guys. Yes, Elizabeth?
I wanted to say just how much I enjoyed the presentation, everything that you offered. It was an immense amount of information, but the whole time I felt connected. And the graphics that you used and the colors that you chose really helped to keep me centered, especially that really light mint green. For some reason, that was really calming in the corner because I was like, I don't know what you're saying. And then like mint green, you know? So the color play was great too. But I'm excited. I knew nothing about human design before this. And now I'm just like, I need to learn more. This is really cool. So thank you for presenting everything.
That's why I said it was so important with you. I was like, see, divine timing, because she's line 6 too, like me. So